Meredith, I want to go to the question I always ask you mid-interview, but let's do it at the top right now. What are you reading in Chinese right now? What is the mood in China as their president goes to this important meeting?
Tom, I'd say the mood is much less optimistic and over the medium and long term than the potential mood could be here in Washington. When you talk to contacts in Beijing, post-Huawei, post the listing of Huawei on the U.S. entity list, those contacts are now talking about Xi Jinping wanting to have had a deal with President Trump. Notice the past tense, wanting to have had a deal. So at this point, the Chinese are not in, let's make a deal that's going to last mode, but they're more so in, what can we do to stave off further escalation? What can we do to manage the risk coming from Washington without actually wanting to agree to a fundamental deal that will resolve the underlying structural constraints that caused the 301 investigation to begin with?
Meredith, always great to have you here on the program. When you look at President Trump and what he's doing with Iran, what's his endgame? Does he want to really bring them back to the negotiating table, or is it the same strategy with China, just pounding them until they try and break?
This is a president that tries a maximalist campaign of pressure to try to bring the people to the negotiating table. But with Tehran in particular, they're not interested in talking. Not after the U.S. pulled out of the agreement, not after its own maximalist campaign, and certainly after the U.S. ended all oil sanction waivers, Francine, we're seeing a change in strategy from Tehran since April. And that is reminiscent in all of the uptick in attacks that we've seen on oil tankers, oil infrastructure, the downing of a U.S. drone. Keep in mind that in the last month alone, there were attacks on 3 drones, 2 of which were successful. What is Tehran trying to do here? They're essentially trying to claw back leverage from the U.S. in preparation for an eventual negotiation. But Tehran certainly is not interested in talking now. But I would say, should we have a second-term President Trump, at that point, Tehran is unlikely to be able to withstand the economic pressure that we've seen to date, and will probably look to move towards some sort of talk, negotiation to relieve that pressure.
But Meredith, if you look at the pressure points at which President Trump is applying, so there's China, there's possibly Turkey with the sanctions linked to a Russian mobile defense system which they bought, and there's Iran. What worries you the most? Is Iran and the region the one where actually things could turn ugly?
So from a conflict standpoint, I would say Iran is the risk that worries us at Eurasia Group most. Francine, last week alone, before the U.S. called on and then rescinded the retaliation attacks for the downing of the U.S. drone, we raised our probabilities for a war-like scenario with U.S. and Iran to 40%. Let me just say that again, 40%. And in that, what we're seeing is both Tehran is being far more tolerant of the risks of directly attacking U.S. assets in the region. That combined with President Trump having hawks in his administration that are pushing him for more of a retaliation. What you could see is a trigger point that could cause both sides, even though they do not want war, it could cause both sides to move beyond the brink. And the most concerning trigger for us at Eurasia Group is if you have an Iranian attack that results in the loss of U.S. life, that could trigger President Trump to actually retaliate.